You're listening to the Call Kent podcast, where Kent C. Dodds answers questions and gives insights to software engineers like you. Now, let's hear the call.
Hey, Kent. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Jake Lazaroff's article on web components and how they will outlive frameworks. All right, thanks. Bye.
And that was the call. Here's what Kent had to say.
Hey, Roman. Thank you for the question. So, you linked to the article. That'll be in the notes of the episode for those listening. It's a fine article. There are a couple of things that I have problems with web components. So the point is, platform stuff is going to last longer than stuff that is not part of the platform, for sure. That's especially with the basically requirement that the web not break itself. There are exceptions to that, but for the most part, we don't break the web. Whatever is a part of the web platform is going to stay for longer. But web components, there are lots of parts of the web that are not actively used either. And so to say that web components will outlive your JavaScript framework, yes, it's technically true, but will web components ever outstrip the level of use that your framework has? I would say that web components will probably not be something that web developers are actively using more than they actively use React. Now, whether web components will be deployed to more sites than React or whatever, that to me doesn't matter. I don't care about the number of deployments in particular. I care about how actively web developers are using a particular technology, because that's my interest. I'm not personally, I don't care how many deployments there are of something like WordPress is still like the vast majority of deployments on the internet. And so whatever WordPress decides to include in their default stuff is what's going to get the most deployments. But does it impact the lives of most developers? No, it doesn't. So I'm interested in what impacts the lives of most developers. And so I'm not interested in having a discussion about what gets most deployments. Okay, so with that out of the way, I do think that React will be more widely utilized by web developers as a regular part of their day than web components going into the future. I actually feel pretty confident that before web components outstrips React, if it ever gets close to that point, before that even happens, we'll have a completely different programming model than we do today. There are just too many advancements going on in the world of AI in particular, and things that where I think that web components would even have time to catch up. Now, even that would be enough, but there are some very big problems with web components. And I am going to just link to this article by Rich Harris, where he explains a bunch of these problems. He wrote it back in 2019. Looks like he updated it in 2020. So it is a little bit dated, but so are web components. When they first came out, they were already dated. So I will link you to that as kind of my, because it supports a lot of the same problems that I have personally with web components. Now, in particular, the article is talking about Markdown and the fact that you can use HTML inside of Markdown, and web components can be used as like HTML. So you can just put your HTML directly in the Markdown, and as long as you have a document.define element somewhere that defines the elements that are in your Markdown, then poof, you have interactive Markdown, which is awesome. We get that with React using MDX. This is a platform version of that. That's super cool. But the big problem with this is that it doesn't server render, and that you just hit a ceiling of user experience if you're not server rendering your stuff. I understand not everybody cares about server rendering, but not everybody cares about that ceiling of user experience either. I do. I care about that ceiling of user experience, and I want to make that user experience as awesome as possible. Now, there are certainly some things that you wouldn't server render. So like one example in here is like a little drawing canvas thing, this pixel art demo that's in the article. You wouldn't really be able to server render that anyway. But I do think that there are a lot of things that we do on the web that we would do in our applications that we do want to have server rendered, and it's just too easy to create things with web components that you're going to have a hard time server rendering. So if you tie your hands with web components, you can make things at least look okay. And be, they're going to server render the HTML tags, of course, and you can style those and everything. And then the interactive bits show up when the define element call gets executed. But if your quote unquote hydrated version of your web component looks different once it's been hydrated, once the define component has happened, then you're going to have a cumulative layout shift problem. And I just think that is awful. So, I think it's the kind of the natural way to write web components is in a way that does not server render at all. And so I take big issue with that as well. So yes, web components will absolutely be around for as long or longer than any framework. But no, I really don't think that they're going to be as big or as impactful on a regular developer's day-to-day for practical reasons, in the fact that I don't think we're going to be writing our applications the same way in a decade. And I think that there are some serious limitations with web components. So, like, people have been talking about everybody should use web components forever, and we don't, because there are some big problems with it. It's not just because we are stupid or we like to make things more complicated. It's because there are problems with web components. So there's your nuanced answer. I hope that's helpful, and check out the links in the episode description. Take care.
This has been the Call Kent podcast. Learn more about Kent at kentcdodds.com and get your own questions answered at kentcdodds.com/calls.